When you add two numbers with the same sign, what you just do is add their positive version. So same sign would be like if you're adding a negative plus a negative, or you're adding a positive plus a positive. So when you add two numbers with the same sign, add their positive version. So technically we're going to go over this later about absolute value, but you're going to want to add their absolute values. So for example, -3 plus -5. Just think about their positive version. So what's 3 plus 5? Well, it's 8, so this is going to turn into -8. 6 plus 7 is 13, we know that. And then -2 and -2. Think of their positive versions. So that's just going to be 2 plus 2, which is 4, but it's actually going to be -4. And then 4 plus 5 is 9. When you add two numbers with different signs, find the difference, so difference means subtract, of their positive versions, and then your answer will have the same sign as the larger number. So an example would be is you're just going to look at 6 and 2. Don't look at that -6 and 2. Just look at it as 6 and 2. So I'm going to do the difference of 6 and 2, which is 6 minus 2, which is 4, and I'm going to take the sign that's larger. So the one that has the either more negatives or more positives is a -6. So this is going to turn into -4. If I'm adding 3 and -7, I'm going to take the difference of 7 and 3. So 7 minus 3 is 4. And the one that has the more negatives or more positives is -7. So the answer is -4. If I do -5 plus 10, I'm going to do 10 minus 5, which is 5. And the answer, in the original problem, there's more positives with the 10, so the answer is just 5. And 4 plus -9. I know the answer is going to be negative because there's more negatives, so there's going to be 5 negatives because 9 minus 4 is 5. So sometimes you just have to look for if they're the same sign or different signs. So -10 plus -4. A negative plus a negative is a negative. 13 minus 7 is 6, and it's going to be a positive 6. 3 minus 1 is 2, and it's going to be a positive 2 because there's more positives. So I'm going to do examples with number lines too in class, but I'm just showing you this rule right here. So examples in context. The temperature falls 15 degrees. So to represent falls 15 degrees, I'm going to make a negative number, -15. And then rises 18 degrees is a positive 18. So use addition to find the change in temperature. So the actual temperature change is 3 degrees. So you want to write a unit. You can either write 3 degrees or you can write 3 degrees like this. The temperature in the morning is -38 and it rises 20 degrees. What is the new temperature? It's -18 degrees. So when you subtract two numbers, you can do what's called add its opposite. So what you do is you change the problem to an addition problem and make the second number opposite. Make whatever you're subtracting opposite. So if I change this to an addition problem, I need to take 5 as the opposite. So 3 plus -5, the answer is -2. So you need to actually think of making 2 pencil marks. You need to change it to a plus. You need to make the next one an opposite. So this turns into 6 plus 2, which is 8. So here's more examples. So 12 minus 6. Really, I know we know 12 minus 6 is 6, but it could be 12 plus, now you gotta make 6 an opposite. So 12 plus negative 6 is 6. Negative 4 plus negative 8 is negative 12. 18, there's two negatives, so two negatives make a positive. It's 20. Oops. And then D, negative 3 plus, I changed this to an opposite, so negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2. So down here, evaluating, so you're going to evaluate. So evaluate means to plug these numbers in. And when you're plugging in negatives, I always just, as a rule of thumb, I put them in parentheses. When you're plugging in negatives, you put them in parentheses. So you can rewrite the expression if there's a lot of negatives. I really don't think there's a lot of negatives for this, so I'm just going to do C, which is negative 3, minus D, which is negative 6. So to evaluate this, I'm going to change this one to plus and make the opposite. So now it's turning into negative 3 plus 6, which is 3. Next one, it's negative C, or negative C, which C was negative 3, minus D, which is negative 6. So what happens is you have two negatives that make a positive right here, and these two negatives make a positive, so you're left with 3 plus 6, which is 9. And then negative C, which is negative 3, plus D, which is negative 6. So negative 3 is 3, plus negative 6, which is negative 3, is the answer. Okay, let's try some of these out. So simplify these. So 10, this is going to turn into plus negative 19, which is negative 9, plus, add the opposite, this will turn into negative 3, plus a negative, negative 16. And then when I'm evaluating these, what I want to do is I want to make sure when I'm plugging in negatives, I put them in parentheses. So negative 2 minus negative 7. So this was my x, this is my y. I have two negatives, so I want to change that. And so now I'm going to have a 5 is my answer. So y, which is negative 7, minus x, which is negative 2. Add the opposite, so I'm going to get negative 5. And then the opposite of x, which is negative 2, minus y, which is negative 7. And again, you have a double negative, so and add the opposite. So 2 plus 7 is 9. So just make sure when you're plugging in negatives, you put them in parentheses. And then just want to review some things about fractions. So remember, to reduce a fraction, you want to divide both the numerator, so this is called a numerator, and the denominator by the same number. So I'm going to divide both of these by 4, because that's the highest number that goes into it. So I'm going to get negative 3/2. It's okay to divide by 2 and then divide by 2 again. It's fine. It's just a little faster to find the greatest number, the highest number. And then a common denominator. That's denominator, remember, means the bottom. So it means what can we change this denominator to compare them? So which number can be divided by both 4 and 3? What are some numbers that can be divided by 4 and 3 evenly? So 12. You can make a common denominator of 12 if you want. You could do 24 because they both go into 24. You could do 36, etc. And then when you're adding fractions, remember you want to get a common denominator. So in this case, I'm going to change my common denominator to 15. So in order to be 15, I got to multiply the top and the bottom by 3 here. So this turns into 6. And I have to multiply the top and the bottom, the numerator and denominator, by 5. So my resultant is going to be 6 plus 10, which is 16. And when remember you want to add fractions, you need to keep the denominator the same. And when you subtract fractions, you want to keep the denominator the same, but you still first need to get a common denominator. So in this case, it's going to be 21. So I'm going to multiply the numerators and the denominator by 3 on this one, and the numerator and the denominator by 7 on this one. So it's going to be 6 over 21 minus 7 over 21. 6 minus 7 is negative 1. You keep the denominator the same. So I'm just going to do a couple more examples of reducing a fraction. So if I reduce this, I can divide them both by 6. So it's negative 4/5. The common denominator of 1/2 and 4/5, I would use 10. And then if I'm going to add fractions, I'm going to want to get a common denominator. So what you could do is you could write negative 5 as negative 5 over 1. So your common denominator is going to be 10. So it's going to be negative 50 tenths plus 1/10, which is negative 49 tenths as an answer. And then I want to get a common denominator of 8. So this would be negative 2/8 minus 5/8, which is the same thing as negative 2 minus 5, which is negative 7/8. And also be able to move back and forth with improper fractions of mixed number. So this is called a mixed number because you can think of it as there's a mix of two different types of numbers. There's a mix of a whole number with a fraction. So to write as a mixed number, what you need to do is multiply the denominator by the whole number. So 3 times 7 and get 21, and then add the numerator. So it's going to be 23, and you write it over the denominator. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to multiply 6 times 10, which is 60, add the 4, so it's 64, and I write it over 10. Now both of these I should check to I can reduce it. I can't reduce this. I could divide both of these by 2 and get 32 over 5. Now to change a number to a mixed number, what you want to do is you're thinking of writing, this means how many 3's are there in 11? Well, there's 3 groups of 3 in 11 with 2 left over. And then I'm going to keep the denominator the same. So how many times does 3 go into 11? 3 times with 2 left over, because 3 times 3 is 9, but you need 2 more to get to 11. So you can always check it by doing 3 times 3 is 9 plus 2 is 11. So it's 11/3. So I'm going to do how many times does 5 go into 32? It's 6. There's 2 left over. And you can always check it. 6 times 5 is 30 plus 2 is 32 over 5.